Hello, it's Andrea Dunlop. Welcome back to Nobody Should Believe Me Case Files. This is part 2 of our mini-series on the Jesika Jones case. Today is the first half of my interview with Derek Jones, the father of the victims in this case. I so appreciate Derek's candor about his relationship with Jesika and just his willingness to share his story with us. Our new season is coming out on January 2nd, and a reminder that if you subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Patreon, you will get the entire season, all 8 episodes on the launch date. And I have to tell you, I think you're going to want to binge this one. We are getting these episodes in the can now, and my team has just really knocked it out of the park with this season. Subscribing is a great way to support the show, and if monetary support is not an option, leaving us a review on Spotify or Apple helps a great deal, as does telling friends about the show on social media or wherever you talk to people. You can watch a video of this episode on our YouTube channel if you like to see faces, and on Instagram you can follow me at Andrea Dunlop and the show, which is at Nobody Should Believe Me Pod. Now, here's the interview. Derek, thank you so much for being here with us. So we are here today to talk about the Jesika Jones case, which we have also spoken to Detective Mike Weber about. And I am very anxious to talk to you about your story and just your perspective on this. And can you just start by telling us who you are and how you relate to this case?
All right. So my name is Derek Jones. I'm the father of the oldest and the youngest victims in the case.
You're also Jessica's ex-husband. Is that right?
Well, hopefully soon.
Okay.
So you're trying for a while.
Oh boy. Okay. So you're in the process of becoming Jessica's ex-husband. So how did you and Jessica originally meet?
We met through Facebook, actually.
So when was this?
I want to say it was towards the end of 2016.
So whereabouts do you live?
I live around the Fort Worth area. At the time, I didn't. I lived over in Archer City, which was a good hour and a half from Fort Worth, roughly, I think.
Okay. And so you guys were chatting for a couple of months online. And what were your kind of first impressions of her and who she was?
I mean, nothing stood out that was like alarming or anything like that. You know, I was like, hey, this is, I was enjoying the conversation. It's hard because I look back at it now and I have a different perception. I was in a dark place back then. And so I don't think that helped with my judgment very well. But I mean, back then I looked at it as I didn't see anything alarming and, this nice girl that had her stuff together. And like I said, I was a single guy. So I was like, hey, why not?
And then did she eventually suggest that you meet up in person? And how did that piece of things develop?
We both were like talking back and forth about meeting up in person. And then finally I was able to have a free weekend when she had a free weekend. And so then we finally just made plans to meet up. And like I said, it was about 3 months after we started chatting that we finally met up. I came up to Fort Worth.
I completely understand where you're at with all of this because it's really hard once you have the kind of revelations that you've had about someone to sort of put yourself back in that position where you're trying to remember what it was like when you first met them. And I think like one of the things that people sometimes don't understand about what being close to a situation like this does to your brain is that like it kind of splits your life in half, right? Like I feel like not only do I sometimes have trouble remembering, because I think I have a sister who's a perpetrator, and that's what brings me to this work. And not only do I have trouble remembering like what she was like before I knew all of this, I have trouble remembering what I was like. I have trouble remembering who I was before all of this happened because it feels like, it feels like the situation sort of broke my brain and I just didn't look at the same, like I don't look at the world the same way. And so it's sort of like you end up like also questioning yourself a lot, right? Like why did, I think I can hear you kind of doing some of that. Like why would I ever, choose a person like this when reality is like a lot of people, are like if you're a nice person and you're an honest person and you go through life like not doing things like this, like it's not something that you're just on the lookout for, right?
100%. Yeah, it definitely makes you stop. And when everything came out, it made me, and once I got clear headed and understanding of everything, and I was like, where was my judgment at, you know? Um, but it also makes you stop and look at it. Like you said, it's like, it's hard to remember how I thought back then.
Yeah.
Because I'm leaps and bounds ahead of where I was even back then. And so it's hard to think about it, like to the point of remembering exactly what were your thoughts. Because myself nowadays, I'd have been like, what in the world? Something's off here. But at the same time, going through this has also made me heighten my awareness, like little things will throw, catch red flag, and it's made me harder to trust people.
Yeah.
Because it makes you, like I said, it makes you question your judgment, but it's like you thought you knew yourself better than that, but now you're like, now that you've come out on the other side, you're like, before I'd have been just like, oh yeah, no problem, like I believe you. Now I'm like, yeah, and then I'm gonna take some time and evaluate it and think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think, one of my big hopes with the show is that for other people who are somewhere earlier along in that process, that by hearing it, they may
Hmm.
have that moment earlier and that's helpful because it's just, if you've never been through it, if you've never been through anything like it, if you've never heard about it, if you, haven't spent years studying it like I have, then it's like
Yeah.
you're not gonna see it coming. And I think it's that's just human. So I hope you can also find some grace for yourself. But so nonetheless, you guys end up meeting in real life and you start dating, and it was a tough moment in your life, which I'm sure also, that's like, I think sometimes people think, oh, this would never happen to me, I would know what was happening. But the reality is
Hmm.
that like we all have moments in our life when we're more vulnerable for whatever reason. So it sounds like this was kind of a moment like that for you, maybe. What was going on in your life? You had, I think, you had kids from a previous marriage also?
I had one from a
Okay.
previous marriage. Um, and I was just in that place in life where then I didn't know that I was in a depression and everything. And I really didn't learn how deep of a depression I was in until actually all this came out. I didn't realize and how far I had disassociated myself with family and everything else. And so I look back now and, like I said, my judgment wasn't the best. And I will put 100% that it wasn't now that I look back. But, we started, we started dating, we started hanging out, and she would come up and see me and I would go up there and see her. And it ended up moving really quick. I want to say it was around April of 2017 that she had called me up to let me know that she was pregnant.
So you hadn't been dating for very long and you were
We
still
hadn't
kind
been
of living
dating.
living
Yeah.
in two different places, and so you were just
Hmm.
sort of in that getting to know each other phase, and then she calls you and tells you she's pregnant.
Yeah. She calls me and tells me she's pregnant. And I was like, well, I'll be there. I'm not going nowhere. I'll be there for my kid. We keep dating. She calls me one day and she goes, hey, I just got back from the doctor and he says there's two of them. And I said, no, you're kidding. And she says, no, I'm not. I'm like, no, this is not funny. Like, all joking aside, how did the appointment go? She's like, really? We're having twins. And I was like, wow, you know? And so I ended up making plans and moving up to Fort Worth with her because I wanted to be here through the pregnancy. And
I mean, that must have been so overwhelming. So you're going from being like divorced out of one, sounds like, to dating a new woman. Now you've got twins on the way. That's just a lot to figure out. And what do you do for work? Like, was your work based, I assume, where you live, or was it sort of flexible?
at the time, my work was where I lived. And then I found a job up in Fort Worth when I moved up here. Um, looking back on it, it should have been an alarm that, hey, she was in transition of houses, so she was staying at her grandmother's house. But she's like, my grandmother said you can move in here with me, and like I said, I wasn't in the best mindset, and so I ended up moving in there with her grandmother, and
And you'd said earlier that when you first met her via Facebook and sort of your first impressions of her, that it seemed like, she like had her stuff together, like she had her act together. Like what did she did what was she doing for work? Like what else did you sort of know about her? What kind of came to light as just maybe even in this period while you were dating and she gets pregnant?
she told me she had been a nurse at Cook's, but then she had told me when I'd moved in there, she was working at a nursing home. And then right before I moved in, she had been working at a nursing home. Once I moved in, pregnancy was getting hard on her, and she told me that the doctor said, hey, if I don't start taking it easy, they're going to what is it?
Bed rest.
Bed rest for the rest of the pregnancy. And this was way early on. Me being a young, dumb guy, I didn't know nothing about it. And I fed right into it because I'm like, okay, there's two. I've only been, my first one was just one. And so maybe the twin pregnancy is different. Maybe, it's a lot of stuff
sure
like
enough,
that.
they are higher. It is a higher risk pregnancy situation. Mm-hmm. I mean, that much is true. Were you going to any appointments with her during this time, or was this all kind of what she was reporting to you?
This is what she was reporting to me. I went to one or two when they had the ultrasound. I was actually three or four. It was only when they were doing the ultrasound.
Okay.
The regular doctor's appointments, I usually didn't make it to. I was working.
Yeah, I mean, you have about a billion of them when you're pregnant, so yes. That's not how you go all the time.
Well, and I was the only one working since supposedly she had to take it easy. So it was hard to get off work. I just started this job, didn't have a lot of flexibility of asking a lot of time off. And so time goes on, we get later on in the pregnancy, she starts having more at risk, in and out of the hospital. And they were gonna, hey, we might have to keep you just to watch, in case they try to come early. They ended up coming, I want to say it was 37 weeks.
So a little bit early, but not
a little early.
Not too early.
They were tiny though. One was 3'7", I want to say, and the other one was 4'1".
Oh wow!
If I remember my numbers correctly. So they were tiny. They were at the point I was scared to hold them. I'm like, I'm going to break them just if I move wrong, I made a couple of the first doctor's appointments when we would go see their pediatrician, and everything was fine.
And how were you guys kind of settling in as a couple? Like, did she, because she had also some other children from a previous marriage, is that right? Did they live also with her, or like what was did you meet the ex-husband? Like what were kind of the family dynamics that were coming together as you were settling in?
Yes, she had three other ones. They all lived with her. I met the ex-husband, as hey, I'm Derek. Hey, I'm so-and-so, other than that, never really chatted. Throughout all this, she had fed me stuff that put me against him and made him, oh, he's like this. And when you're in that situation, you're going to support your other half, and no reason not to believe, or I didn't have any proof against it. So, that's about the extent with him. We didn't really care for each other. I would meet him to drop the kids off or meet him to pick the kids up. But, the oldest
so
one.
You kind of just had the impression that was not a good, that they hadn't had a very good relationship. Yes. And they weren't on sounds like they were on okay terms, but just a generally sort of negative vibe.
Yes, ma'am. I would go, or I would help out and watch the kids when she'd have to take the oldest one to her, neurology appointments and stuff. And I would I tried to make some of those, but the ones that I would make were few and far between. Like I said, I was still new in my job, and
Yeah. And you said the older one was going to neurology appointments. What was the health? Did the oldest child also have health issues?
supposedly had epilepsy.
Okay.
Apparently, it supposedly had epilepsy since I was told by her 1 year old, since she was a year old. Looking back on reports and stuff, it looks like she started reporting it around like 3 months.
Okay. And then the middle two, did they have any health issues? The middle two?
One had some gastro issues. The other one, no. The oldest one, like I said, I was told she had epilepsy. She could have seizures and had them here and there. She was on like she was taking, shoot, I want to say at times I think it was like anywhere from 5 to 7 pills. I can't remember if it was morning and evening or per day. There's quite a few. We had to pill thing set out for each day.
And so it sounds like so that the eldest lived with y'all full time, and then the two middle ones that were from her ex husband because they were from different dads. Is that right? And so the two middle ones they were sharing custody.
Yes, the two middle ones were sharing custody. The oldest one was with her full time. So as time went on, the girl started getting older, and they had some speech problems and stuff like that. And one was always closer to me, and one was always closer to her.
And are they both girls or boy girl or
Both girls.
so it sounds like in the beginning, they're born like a little bit early, but not super scary. They're a little on the small side, probably have some issues because of that. And then so maybe had like a few developmental delays, but like nothing super serious right in the beginning.
Yeah, they were just small. We had to put them on the growth formula to help try to gain weight. They weren't really gaining a lot of weight. Still to this day, they are tiny. But their speech was behind and stuff like that. But they had a speech therapist that would come out to the house and help out. That was, I think, around 2 years old, I believe. But other than that, we'd go to the doctor. They still saw the doctors for like trying to, watching growth plates and trying to gain weight and stuff like that.
So were they having like failure to thrive issues?
Kind of, yes.
Okay.
They just
Not super. Did they have like feeding tubes or anything like that, or just
no,
it was
no
sort of
feeding
more
tubes.
mild? Okay.
Well, I believe they said it, failure to thrive, but it was just no matter what you fed them or how many times you fed them, they wouldn't gain weight. I don't know where it went. At least when I was there, they would eat all the time.
And it sounds like you were so you're working full time. Is she a stay at home mom at this point? Does she go back to work at any point, or she's sounds like she's the primary caretaker?
She never went back to work. She was a stay at home mom. I was the one working all the time. I want to say when they were around a year and a half, 2 years old, I got another job. So it'd have been a year and a half roughly because in August of 2019, I got a new job, but I started traveling with this job. So, she was at home with them all the time. I'd travel a couple days a week. Sometimes I'd be gone a full week. As far as I knew, everything was going all right. They were doing their speech and everything. The oldest one was, she was up and down. She'd have her good times and she'd have her bad times. She had behavioral depression. Looking back on it now, I see why, and I don't blame her, taking medicine that you didn't need and all that, I'm sure played a major role in it. I'd started noticing things, we had started growing apart, me and Jessica.
You and Jessica. Okay.
But I'm one of those people that I would stick around, I'm going to be there for my kids. And I noticed little things that weren't adding up,
And when did you and Jessica get married? Did you get married before the kids came or?
Before the kids. She was big on being married before the kids were born. So I found out, I want to say it was April that she was pregnant, and we were married in June.
So that's a quick trajectory all the way around.
Mm-hmm. Like I said, I look back and I play a part of not being in the right mindset on that. because nowadays I would have never done that. But I was right along with, hey, I'll do what, I'm on board. I'm all in. And like I said, so down the road, I started noticing some, things, like I said, little things not adding up. We weren't getting along as much. And I noticed that she would lay around. I'd come home and clean the house. I'd come home and cook dinner. I was doing the laundry, and it was the more and more that I was working, the more and more it was frustrating me, because it was like, hey, I'm working. The least you can do is help out around the house. I don't
Yeah,
expect you to do
absolutely.
it all. I'm asking for some help. I'm wore out. And so we started, we were stressed out with each other, and we started arguing more and more. And around 3.5 years old, the youngest one started showing sign, like it was like she was slowing down. She was never really super vocal. She was always the quiet one, but she just was more and more not herself. And I'm like, maybe she's just having a rough patch. I started noticing things more and more with Jessica, and I'm like, hey, the rougher we got, the more she started almost like backpedaling to try to find things. Like she came up with that she had cancer, and
Like that she had a current cancer so things are getting tough with you guys, and then she tells you that she's been diagnosed with cancer.
mhm,
Okay. What type of I mean, that must have been that must have been
leukemia.
really okay. So she says she tells you she has leukemia. I mean,
hmm
that's very serious, especially as an adult. Actually, I had an adult cousin that died of leukemia. So I mean, that must have been terrifying.
The crazy thing is her mom had actually had cancer, and so looking back on it, it was like you're so messed up because like your mom actually had it, and you ended up making up this fake thing of having. But at the time, she made it real believable because I started noticing more and more bruises on her. And she'd wake up with two new bruises. And I mean, she was covered in bruises head to toe. And I'm like, something's wrong. And then that's when it came out, hey, she went to the doctor and she had leukemia. And
And are you still living with her grandmother, or had you guys moved out into your
we,
own space by then?
we had our own space. And I was like, I didn't know a lot about leukemia. I'd never known anybody that had it. I knew of leukemia, but I didn't know a lot about it. So I was Googling, and, you can get bruise easy and stuff like that. And so she was playing it all to where it was very believable.
I mean, that's really scary. Like you have two little kids at home. You're already sort of like super stressed just because it's stressful, and you have other
hmm
kids that are living part time with you, and you're working full time. And so, I mean, did she start treatment? Like what happened next?
She said that had caught it on early, and they were trying this new, um, they wanted to try her on this new thing they had for it. It was like a pill based thing. Um, and supposedly she was taking those.
Like a drug trial or something like that.
Yes.
Okay.
Before they went to chemo or radiation, they wanted to try this. And it had gotten so bad that at one point, I think she had like 98 bruises on her. I don't
Wow.
know. Looking back, I don't know if she was just because at this time, we still weren't getting along great. Most of the time, I was sleeping on the couch. And I don't know if she was just hitting herself in the night. I really don't know how she was making it happen.
But it sounds like it was pretty dramatic. Like she
Oh,
really
it was.
looked awful. Yeah.
I was scared to go out in public thinking that somebody thought I beat her or something. Like I said,
Yeah.
I'm not, when I say head to toe, I mean arms, chest, legs, and that, or she was taking something to lower maybe iron, or I don't know, to where she bruised easier, because all you had to do is barely, I mean, if somebody walked up and like tapped her to like get her attention, she might bruise there.
Wow.
And she had never really been like that before. And so I was, like I said, it played hand in hand and was real believable. I had no reason not to believe it. At that time, I'm like, why would it never crossed my mind of why would somebody lie about having cancer of all things.
Yeah.
And so,
Most people Most people wouldn't. But so yeah,
Yeah.
it's not something that you're watching out for, not something that you see coming for sure.
So time goes on, and the youngest starts, showing more signs and stuff of not being okay. Her health is, lacking some. And I want to say it was right before, trying to remember when it came out that she didn't have cancer. I want to say it was right before the youngest actually started going to the hospital, really, for, you know, seizure like symptoms. And it came out that I finally had people pointed out to me. They're like, hey, you're not looking at this right. Like, where's her paperwork? Where's this? Where's that? And every
So
time that
so
she
some
had
other people sort of who weren't as close to the situation
outside the
were
picture, yeah,
were seeing that. Yeah. Yeah.
yes. And so during a lot of the reverse for a little bit, she had me so brainwashed that I quit talking to my side of the family for, or at least my mother and stepdad. I quit talking to them for year and a half.
Wow. What brought
Um,
that on?
she they had some disagreements, and I was backing her. You know, I look back and she had me pretty dang brainwashed
So it
because it's
sounds like
not
it
stuff.
became kind of a like us and them, like if you're
Hmm.
either with me or you're against that, like that kind of
Yeah,
thing. And maybe they had some questions about her and she turned you on them basically.
I look back. Well, I look back and there was. I should have left a law. I should have left a long time ago. There's things I'm not proud of. The biggest thing that caused the rift between her and my parents was they had let her borrow a handgun one time, and they kept asking for it back and kept asking for it back, and well, come to find out, she sold it. So he filed a police report that you know it turned out as a stolen gun simply because she had sold it and it wasn't hers to sell. So I should have left then, but I can't even remember the whole scenario. But somehow this came out, I want to say right before the twins were born or right after, somewhere right in that time frame. And somehow she got me to stay.
Well, I mean, we all like to think that we're making these sort of, logical, rational choices where we like evaluate the evidence in front of us and act accordingly, right? But I mean, the emotional reality there is like you're in this relationship that went from 0 to 100 and you either have brand new babies in the house or you have twins that are about to arrive. That's a place where you have a lot to lose if you
Mm-hmm.
decide to do that, right? Like, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you would want to believe whatever her story was about the gun rather than that she just did something that seems dishonest and shady and questionable, right?
Yeah. She was she was a very good liar. I will say that.
Yeah, and like I'm
Very.
sure even if you don't remember exactly what her story was, I can imagine it in my head. I'm sure there was a story of like why she had to do it or why it wasn't what it looked like, or some big long
Yes.
explanation about like how she was the victim actually because your stepdad filed that police report and how could he do that, and that was so mean to her, and like it's I can really I can hear the whole thing.
It turned out it was it's either me or them. Like we're not seeing eye to eye, and I had these babies right there, and I told my parents, I'm like, it's not what y'all think, and I took her side. Exactly what you just said. It's one of those where you look back and you're like, man, if I was somebody else listening to my own story, I'd be like slapping myself up beside the head, like, what in the world were you thinking, man? But they're so good at manipulating you and lying to you. I look back and I'm like, because once this all first came out, I'm gonna fast forward for a second. When it's all first came out, it was real hard on. I took it really hard.
About the leukemia
Uh,
or
once everything came out about what she had done overall, because I was like, I felt like I didn't protect my kids, and how could I stick around through all this, and what kind of dad was I or man was I? And so looking back, yes, it's like all through everything. So we'll go back to the leukemia. So she says she has leukemia, and then it comes out she don't. I started asking for paperwork and stuff, and she's like, "I'm waiting on them to email," and I kept on and I kept on, and I'm like, "Okay, something's not adding up." And then finally, it came out that she didn't.
And did you confront her on this? And
I did.
what was her explanation for the fake leukemia?
She said that she was just in a really dark place, and we weren't doing good, and she just something was off with her, health wise, and she just it wasn't the right decision. She knows that, but she wishes she could change it, but she couldn't. So I went and filed for divorce.
So that was it for you. Like that, the fake leukemia, you were like, this is not a normal thing to do. This is, yeah, like, I mean, that's a, yeah, that's an understandable next step, right?
Well, that's where I really start to judge myself, because then we're still living in the same house at the time. I'm trying to save up money to get my own place. She says she's going to counseling, shows me this counselor she's going to and everything. She wishes she could take it back, but she couldn't, and she's trying to work on herself. And then the oldest starts starts having more seizure stuff and everything. And I got roped back in. I stuck around. I look back now and I know why I did it. I did it for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do it for her. I did it for the kids. But I was still in such a shaded place that in me nowadays, I would have been 100 miles down the road. I don't care if I had a place to live or not. I would have been living in my vehicle. Like I said, when we first met, I was, looking back, I was really depressed. I never got out of that because of everything we had went through.
Yeah, then you just start piling on like stressor after stressor after stressor. And like, it's not like she came out the gate with the leukemia lie, right? It's like, there was like this and this and then and this and this and this, and then the gun, then
we're like,
yeah,
3.5 years in and 4 years in, somewhere along those lines. And we're on thin ice. I still have the paperwork turned into the court. I ended up pulling it out, and I tell her, like, hey, you've really got to show me that you're going to change. Like, I don't want to have another set of my, kids growing up in a broken family, but I can't stick around. You do anything like this again, I can promise you I'm hightailing. Like, this is your last saving grace. And deep down inside, I was doing it for the kids. The love I felt, this is me being true and honest now. It's the love, was already gone. But growing up, I grew up in a broken family. And I was like, I don't, already have one kid with a broken family. I don't want my others. If there's any chance that she can turn her life around, people we're all human. We all make mistakes. I know that, but it was like, that was a pretty big mistake, but I'm like, hey, this is your final shot. So I went back, and then the youngest starts getting sicker. And November 2021, it should be. That's when the youngest went into the hospital the first time for seizure-like symptoms. And that's where everything started falling into place, of things happening. She started, becoming a kid over the next couple months after that I didn't recognize. That's my daughter, but she's completely different now.
How so?
Sleeping all the time, just less vocal, it's hard to even explain. It's, as a parent, when you see your kid, like, and something's off, you can tell.
Absolutely.
And I knew something was off, but it was like, and that's where, by saying like that, like it was my kid, but it wasn't, like, it was off. Like, she wasn't her normal self, and it just kept getting further and further from her normal self. And so she was going, she back and forth to the hospital and the ER.
And did she have, to your knowledge at this point, did she have like a diagnosis, or just like she's having these symptoms and we don't know what's wrong with her?
She was having these symptoms. They couldn't figure it out, but they wanted her to start She would send, she'd be like, hey, she's having seizures. I'm going to take her to ER. I need you to come home and stay with the kids. So I'd leave work, come home, and first couple times they didn't know. So they started telling her, like, hey, when you witness these episodes, please record it and send it to us or bring it into her next doctor's appointment so we can view it.
Right, because part of the problem with things like seizure disorders is they can put them on, the machine you were talking about
Mm-hmm.
before with the older child, they can put them on an EEG for observation in case they happen to have a seizure
Yeah.
during that time. But it's
If they
it
don't,
can be really hard to catch it. So it can be hard to sort of get that information, which is why they ask parents to record so the doctors can look at what the episode actually looks like, right?
mm-hmm. So they had done I want to say, I can't remember if it was a 24 or 48 hour at the hospital EEG. She told me they caught a few little ones, but it wasn't enough for them to find, go off of anything. And so they had moved us over to neurology at Cook's to start seeing them so that, you see the doctor once or twice while you're in the hospital, but they wanted, where they could get on a more personable level. The doctor said, hey, I want you to video if you see anything. So a month or two goes on. She's getting worse. One day I get a video from her, and she'd send it to my mom too, of this episode. And growing up, never being fully around somebody that had seizures other than her older sister, but I'd only witnessed a very glimpse of that also of the older one. So when I see it on the video, my assumption is, hey, she's shaking and stuff. I think that's a seizure. I full heartedly, when your daughter's sitting there like this, I'm thinking she's having a seizure. To me, that's what I figured it looked like.
Well, and sure enough, there can be a pretty big range of what a seizure looks like, right?
Yeah, it's not, hey, one set standard, there.
But something in the video when you saw it, something was happening.
She
right?
was laying on the couch
okay.
shaking, she was getting to the point where she was having these episodes of peeing on herself more. It was her, like I said, her health was declining. And you get more and more concerned as a parent. You're like, something's got to be done. We need to figure something out. If it's not this, it's got to be something. And a week or two after that video, she ends up having more seizures. She's like, hey, I called the emergency number. They want me to take her in when you get home because she's had a couple today and she's real lethargic right now. Okay, I'm rushing home. She takes her up there. They end up admitting her for a day or two to observate her. And then I was like, did you show them the videos? And she's like, yeah, they see it. They said those are small ones, but she never had one in there. So they're like, hey, we're going to send her home and do a 72-hour EEG at home where she's more relaxed, more comfortable, where where they've been happening. So maybe we can catch one there. So here she comes home. She has to keep this backpack on her for 3 days, has her, all the stuff on her head, all gauzed up. And they'd even went in and done MRI, I think. Was it an MRI of her brain? They had to put her to sleep and do 2 tests to her while she was asleep. They put her asleep and everything, which that was hard to witness the first time because she started shaking a little bit, when she went to sleep. And so 72 hours, they go back in, take it all out or take it all off. Next day, they tell you it's going to take like 2 days to get the full readings of everything for the doctor to look at it. She calls me when they get it. She said they saw a few little ones on there because we had a button every time we thought we'd see one. We had to hit it. We're supposed to hit it. And she was supposed to, I believe, log it all. Also, every time she thought she saw one in that 72 hours. And supposedly she was doing all that on her phone.
Jessica was supposed to do
Jessica,
that.
yes.
Okay, yeah.
So I'm thinking, okay, now they know there's a few. She's like, hey, they said they're going to call her and they call in this medicine to put her on to start. They want to start on this low dose of I can't even remember what it was called. And a week or two later, this whole time, right before she got caught in June of 2022, May April, May, I'm like, I'm really on her. I'm like, hey, we need to get with these doctors. Like, I'm losing. I felt like I was losing my daughter. Like, I felt like if this kept on, she was going to die. Like, that's how much she was declining. Like, she was pretty much a vegetable at home most of the time. She wanted to sleep all the time and just having accidents. Like, we were going backwards, but she just didn't really talk, and she'd just lay on the couch, and she was just out of it. And I'm like,
And she's like around 4 years old at this point.
yeah, she was 4. And so I was like, I'm losing my daughter. Like, they got to figure, I was starting to get mad. I'm like, they got to figure something out. And so she takes her in June for more seizures, and they admit her. She tells me, that they're observing her, and they move her up to this room where they could have cameras on her watching her, to see how she reacts and stuff like that. They're running tests. I would get calls saying, hey, she's doing better. She's starting to improve. And then I'd get calls saying, hey, she went to the bathroom and she came back in here, and now it's like been an hour or two and she's starting to go down. And I'm like, so she's up and down. Like, what are they thinking? She's like, they're wanting to run more tests. They just came and took more blood.
And this is Jessica's reporting this to you from the
This is
hospital.
yes, Jessica's reporting this to me from the hospital, because I went up there once because it was hard for me to go with all the kids.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to take them into that setting. You could only have like 2
scary.
people in the room
Yeah.
at once. Anyways, she was in there for 4 days. I get a call from her, or a text from her saying, hey, somebody from CPS is about to be calling you, or going to be getting in contact with you. And I was like, whoa, 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 whoa. What are you talking about? She's like, they'll explain everything. I'm like, what's going on? Like, that's serious. How do I go from my daughter's up and down, you're in here in the hospital with her, to now CPS? Like, what? I need some background. She said, I gave the youngest one too much medicine. And I'm like, what do you mean you gave her too much medicine? I'm going back and forth with text because she won't answer her phone. So I get a call from CPS, and they're like, hello, Mr. Jones. Is this Mr. Jones? I said, yes, it is. And she's like, has Jessica reached out to you? I said, she texted me saying somebody from CPS was going to be reaching out to me. And, I'm trying to figure out what. She just said she gave her too much medicine. She said she's been giving her medicine when she didn't need it, and she's been overdosing her on it. She's been making her have these symptoms. And I'm like, froze, and I'm like, whoa. Like, it just caught me off guard. Like, what do you mean? Like, and come to find out, she was giving her Benadryl. That's all I knew of at that moment. And she's like, she's going to be removed. I need you to come. You're going to need to come up here to the hospital to stay with her, the youngest, so that, she's not, or she'll be here by herself. We'll have, somebody from CPS. I was like, no, I'll get somebody to come sit with other kids, and I'll be up there.
And I mean, what's like going through your mind with this information? Because this is, it sounds like they're pretty, like, at least the piece of sort of like the connection is fairly clear, right? They're like, she's been over medicating her.
I was
like,
in
were you just shocked and like you not even processing yet? You're just in it, like just in sort of crisis mode.
Yes, I was in shock. I was in a fog. I was like, it was like the one thing you never think you're going to get hit, up until this point, this whole disease, I had never heard. The only thing I'd ever heard about it was, the Gypsy Rose, and I'd only seen a little bit of that. I'll tell you now, most people don't know much about it at all, if anything. And so I was one of those people, and I'm like, I didn't even know this is what it was really going that way. But so Jessica didn't have a vehicle with her, so I had to go pick her up. She couldn't be around the other kids either, so she had to go to a hotel room. Her uncle got her in a hotel room. I went and picked her up from Cook's and took her over there. The whole way over there, I'm like questioning her. I'm like, what is, like, why? So at this point, when all this happened, we were living with her aunt because we had to be supervised. Really, she had to be supervised because one time when I was out of town for work, we'd been living with her aunt about a year, not even quite a year, 8 months. I was out of town. I get a call from her saying, "Hey, I had to run to Dollar General." We were at the grandmother's house at the time. She said, "Hey, I had to run down the road to Dollar General, and while I was gone, the youngest got a hold of some of my grandmother's Ambien, and so we're rushing her to the ER to get her stomach pumped." Well, because of that, the hospital has to report. So CPS is like, "Hey, since you left her with your grandmother and your grandmother isn't in the best of health, you're not making good judgment. We're going to take the kids, or you can go stay with somebody that we approve that will supervise you."
So it was like a neglectful supervision type of
Yes.
finding. Okay, so that had happened like a year previous to this.
Yes,
incident
maybe a few months less than a year, but somewhere around in there.
Okay.
So we went and stayed. We moved into the aunt's house so we could be supervised for, I can't remember how long it had to be, for 6 months to a year or something like that. So now fast forward, on the ride to that hotel, I'm like, "Why?" And she's like, I've been telling you, like, I need to get out of there. I can't stand my aunt. Like, she's on me, and I was depressed, and this is the only way I knew how to act out and get people's attention. And it got me out of the house, taking her here. And I'm like, that is no reason at all. Like, that's no excuse. So instead, you want to harm your kid to get everybody to get away? Like, okay, say you need to get away. I will watch the kids go. But, that's all I ever got. Then,
He's trying to sort of justify the behavior, which is completely unjustifiable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was my fault because I didn't get us out of there. I think it was 6 or 8 months we had to do it. So our time had just, been out for a month or two. I was trying to find a place, but we hadn't found one yet. And so I'm like, "You're not putting this on me. You're not putting this on me. Like, never in a million years could I do this. Never in a million years did I think you would do this. Like,
right.
Who would harm their kid?"
Right. And not in any universe, a normal, stress response, right, to start harming your child so you can get out of the house.
I've been stressed before, but
Right.
I never in a million years would go to thinking about harming my kids. So I go up, get to the hospital, and I'm sitting there, and she's doing a lot better. My youngest is doing a lot better. She wants to go to the playroom. We go to the playroom. We play. The nurses say she's doing a lot better. So the way they found out was they were doing blood tests, and they did one. It came back with Benadryl in the system, and it came back. They did a second just to verify, and there was still Benadryl. If it was like a one, had given her some before she came in, it would have been out of the system for the second one. So that's how they knew. So they started watching video. And every time she would take her to the bathroom, she would carry her purse with her. So every time they would come out of the bathroom, 30 minutes to an hour later is when she'd start declining. So I get her, so I'm there that night. The next afternoon, we get to leave. I get her home. And from that point on, she she kept getting better and kept getting better. It wasn't on any medicine. It was a few days later, 2 days, I had to go up there and meet with, I had to take them all up to Cook's, the 3 girls. I had to take them, the oldest and the 2 youngest, up to Cook's to meet with, it's this doctor they have in there, and she's checking them out, making sure, how they're doing.
Oh, like the child abuse pediatrician?
Yeah, Dr.
Kaufman?
Kaufman, yes. So go in there. She's talking to them. She's checking them out, and she pulls me to the side. We go talk, and she's starts telling me these things that the video that she had sent me and my mother, she never showed the hospital when she said she did. The actual EEGs didn't show anything. Come to find out, the oldest one, they had never really saw much of anything on any of her tests. So at this time, she was 12. So for 11 years, she's had epilepsy that she didn't have.
Nobody Should Believe Me Case Files is produced and hosted by me, Andrea Dunlop. Our editor is Greta Stromquist, and our senior producer is Mariah Gossett. Administrative support from Nola Carmouche.